I want to start by asking a simple question. What was the earliest version of Apache Airflow that you guys used? 2.5, 2.2.5, 2.4.3? All right. I want to start by my first Apache Airflow experience. It was in 2019. The version was 1.10, actually 1.9. Within a couple of months, it became 1.10. And I was thrown into this project, and my manager hated everything that's celery. So he thrown me into Apache Airflow. He thrown me into Kubernetes, Docker. I had to learn everything on the fly. And if you know, 2019, 2020 for also the era of COVID, and I was on a pharma company. If you connect the dots, I had a very hectic 1.5 years shipping shipping data pipelines for Pfizer COVID vaccine trials. I know it's very closer to the US, but that's what I was doing during those time. And thanks for that experience, 1.5 years later, I joined Astronomer and I worked there for a year. And all of that experience combined made me an independent software consultant or a freelancer, if you might say. And that's what I've been doing since then. And I'm also an Apache Airflow champion because of all this experience. And my job primarily now is to help people adopt Airflow in a better way. And before I talk about all the crazy things that people do with Airflow, I want to take a moment and show you all how crazy Airflow itself is. And by that, I mean the versions of Apache Airflow. Any guesses on how many releases that we do every year as a open source project? That's the last 10 years of releases with Apache Airflow. And after 2019, around COVID, something really got crazy and the adoption is impeccable. And we release at least 12 versions every year. That means one version per month. And along with this, we have been going around and spreading this thing, upgrade to the latest version, right? If there are 12 upgrades and you're doing upgrades every month, how are you as a company adopting Airflow is even going to do this? And at least every year there is 2 major releases apart from the minor ones. There are 12 minor ones, 2 major ones. You will be spending majority of your time upgrading than doing anything else. But so I understand that it's hard for companies also to follow this advice, keep upgrading, use the latest version. So the company I work for the Pfizer vaccine trials, the legacy product I worked on is still in 1.10, and the current project that they are using is in 2.5, and the new project that they are doing is in 3.0.5. Although we tell people upgrade, use the latest one, as a company, this does happen. So, and the most common reason for not upgrading is Airflow didn't support it, so we hacked this thing together. And now that Airflow supports it, we don't know how to migrate the whole thing. One of the smartest example was Asset Watchers. A similar construct was built for 1.10, and it's still there in production, and they're not sure how to move it to 2.x. Another bottleneck for people to move to the newer versions is that you need to adopt to new mental models. There are new constructs coming in every other releases, and you have to adopt it. Everybody have to learn it. Everybody have to use it. But then there are also problems with not adopting it, right? First one is the context switch. Obviously, if you are using 2.x, you can see at least in the first 10 of those in the documentation, in the first 10, there is not even 2.5, right? So the context switch is costly. Obviously, you are going to maintain multiple Airflow instances. And then obviously, if you're going to come and raise an issue in the GitHub or the Slack channel, the community is going to say, please upgrade, we don't support those older versions anymore. And you will be firefighting across all of this. And then this is a classic example. The moment one developer leaves, the context across all of this is lost and you are left with nothing despite having a lot of documentation. So the trade-off here is either move on to a newer version or stick to an older one and deal with all the problems. I kind of recommend midway is use the latest version, of course, whenever possible, but also have an yearly migration plan at least, and then actually implement it. and then document everything. This goes without the saying, but after seeing someone using 1.10 in production still existing after 5 years, I had to say it out and loud. And second question I get asked the most when people trying to adopt Airflow is where to host. And Airflow is like this ball of clay. You can pretty much do anything out of it. Sometimes it will break, sometimes it will not. You can create beautiful pottery out of it. So where do we even host? And there are too many options. Actually, there's only two options: either self-host or you can do a managed hosting. And when people ask me this question, where do I host it, or should I do self hosting or managed hosting? I pretty much show them this matrix. And this matrix, I only want you to focus on the middle column. If you're in a company where you have DevOps people to take care of all the chaos of Docker or Kubernetes or Docker Compose, all the secrets management, you have at least two people in your DevOps team, then obviously self-hosting is a good way. But if you're already in an ecosystem of MWA or GCP, then obviously your obvious choice would be to choose one of those. And Astronomer is by far my favorite product that I've worked on, and I have a high affinity towards that. But the pricing point, if it fits for you, definitely a go-to option for you. Now, if for some reason you're sticking with self-hosting, again, self-hosting is primary for companies like pharma because your data cannot go into even GCP. And I remember my Airflow instance was sitting inside a VM, inside another VM, like it had multiple layers. I don't know for what. So if you were to do this, I would highly nudge you. If you are running anything in production and it has anything about 20 dags, please go for the last one. Set up a Kubernetes cluster and everything, life will be easier. And I've seen people do crazy things with Docker Compose where your Postgres also runs in a Docker Compose thing. And one day something happens that Compose container goes down, you lose all the data. So sometimes it might feel like who would do this, that but there are people who is doing this, and hence we have to impress on that. And when hosting, you have now three modes. I think now it's only two modes. This is also 2.9x. Basic is you run everything in one EC2 container and call it a day, or distributed mode where you run every component in one machine. And with that, you also get a fine-grained access control. The final one is you now I think in 3.1 the only way to do it is to run the DAGs processing as a separate instance so that you can make your Airflow as a platform. We will cover that Airflow as a platform a little bit later. So those are your hosting options. You can do self-hosting or MWA, self-hosting or managed hosting. So now that we have cleared which version to use, how do you do the migrations and everything, let me spend some time on doing DAG authoring. And this is somewhere, I don't know where we lost in as a data engineers. The moment someone talks about workflows, I've seen this pattern again and again, where people go in and start writing DAGs immediately. Here is my data connection. I'm going to create this connection, pull the data, make a bunch of tasks, and there goes my DAG, ships to production. But I want to nudge all of you as engineers to take a step back and spend some time on pipeline design. And this is a very mandatory exercise that I run my clients with. This happens on a Google Sheet and not on a code. What are your workflows? What are your tasks? What are your inputs? What are your outputs? How do we validate it? What are the ways that it can go wrong? This simple exercise will save you a ton of time in development. Primarily because you are doing a lot of due diligence before, like what is your retry mechanism, how important is a particular pipeline, and this also helps you prevent a lot of repetition in the process. Only after figuring these things out, at least have a general layout of this, I move on to the Airflow pipeline design. Now that I have everything in a Google Sheet, I can immediately just transfer those specifications into the operators that I want to use. Where do I want to store the intermediate results? Is XCOM be the rightful tool for it, or the S3 bucket should we go for? All of those translations becomes much, much easier. And for writing the DAGs itself, this has been repeated n number of times through documentation, through talks, but it doesn't go without saying all of these are important. Avoid top level code. You might have seen this in the best practices documentation as well, but insisting on this is important, right? You import a variable, you read it at the top of the DAG file. What happens every time the file gets processed? You're going to spend some time there. Imagine hitting an API and the API fails, your DAG will also fail to process. That's for the top level code. What should you do instead? All the code that is heavy in processing and respect to a DAG, move it into a specific task, and your life will be easier. This is another pattern I've seen people use, using environment variables over Airflow variables. And you can do this, there is nothing wrong with it. Only problem is every time you change an environment variable, you have to restart the whole thing. And that's a pain. Even though, as like, if you're coming from a software engineering background, this is the most easiest thing to do. We have something for that variables, so just why not use it? And this is my favorite, idempotency. No matter how many times we say this keeps coming back. A task that is running in production doesn't matter, even if it has 10,000 times it fails, 10,000 times it passes, there might be one time it will fail. And when it fails, you will retry it. And when you retry it, it has to give the exact same result. So when you're doing code reviews for your DAG, ensure that it's idempotent. This is one of the check marks. I don't know whether there is any linters for us to check this, but anything dynamic in there, or dynamic times, dynamic files, please do ensure that it's not there, and you ensure that it's covered in your review. So some of the general guidelines, if you're updating to a table, do an upsert over an insert. If you're reading specific data, if you're writing specific data, it has to be a full write over an update. Those are some general guidelines for idempotency. Finally, code isolation. When you're working as an Airflow engineer or a data engineer, you're not working in isolation. The code is going to come from all directions. Initially, we'll start with something like this, a DAG and some business logic all coupled together, happily living in a DAG instance. But soon life will get very messy, because people will see the amazingness of Airflow, and they're going to be like, hey, I want to run my pipeline in your infrastructure. I want to run it. Except my libraries are different. I want pandas 2.3, you have 1.2. Now there's going to be a lot of conflict between the teams. And also the development pipeline of all these teams is going to be different. Someone wants to push to production today, but the other team's review has not been complete. So these are some of the issues that can arise. So how do we even solve it? Before going into solution, I want to show a crazy thing I saw in one of the clients' Airflow instance. This is literally there. DAG devs and DAG prod. And on the right is supposed to be the right way to do it. You should ultimately have only one DAG. And I asked them, why do they even have it? And their response was, oh, we don't ever want to expose the developer DAGs to the production by mistake also, because it might break. What might break? Technically, if you're from 1.10 mindset, scheduler will process your DAGs. And back then, if your DAG has any issues, everything will break. So that is the mindset that they are carrying forward to 2.5 as well, and then on to 3.10 as well. 3.0 as well. So if you're doing any of this, please don't. But there are better ways to handle it in terms of code isolation. Why do we want it? Of course, dependency management, individual development flows, ease of testing. My initial proposal for this was to use Kubernetes operator. This is one way to do it. Keep your business logic separate as individual scripts. Let it run on its own. It's testable on its own. Don't ever integrate it with the Airflow core logic. Don't make it everything a Python operator. Complex code can be easily scalable with that aspect. But there is something even better that I've seen, or DAG bundles. So individual teams can create their own DAGs, put it in their own GitHub repositories, and you can just configure. As you can see, this is a list. You can set it in the config, and you can also mention which which branch you have to pull the data from. So if you're pulling from a production branch, that should do it. These are brand new in 3.0. So your old mental models doesn't hold anymore. And if you're again very, very specific on not pushing certain things to production, you can use your DAG tags and the policy. Yesterday, Karen had a very good talk on these policies. Do check them out. You can use these to kind of do like an A/B switch to prevent certain DAGs from entering production ever. And finally, we are still figuring out how to write DAGs better, adopt these new features, right? We had sensors before because we need something to listen to the external events, and that held a slot forever. It's running. And then we use deferrable operators. From deferrable operators, we have moved to asset watches. So this ecosystem is forever growing to adopt features. And finally, infrastructure, where you're hosting it. And this is primarily when you're hosting it by yourself. If you're already in a managed server, I will leave it up to those experts to give you the guidelines. But if you're in any infrastructure, this is again an infra design practice that we do. How much do you need in a Airflow instance, right? If you are only going to run 5 DAGs, probably I wouldn't even let the customers go through any trouble of setting up a whole Kubernetes cluster. All you can do is put an EC2 instance and RDS somewhere sitting there, and we can easily run live. But how many environments would a client need, and how many DAGs are they going to run? How much of it is mission critical? Does it need an independent environment or not? All of these questions you can ask before even. And finally, most importantly, what's going to cost, right? Very important. And once we know all that, I nudge people to create some form of automation. IAC, you have infrastructure as code, and you have infinite amount of tools to do this. The reason to do this is, of course, code is the ultimate truth. I believe that from the heart. And most importantly, engineers leave the company and you will be left with, oh, where is that configuration? What was the thing for that secrets again? And to avoid all of this, have some automation scripts to set up the whole environment as well. And trust me, if you get enough adoption inside your company, someone is going to come and say, oh, we need a new Airflow instance. How do I set it up? And it doesn't have to be a 2-page Google Doc. And the most important thing in CI/CD pipelines per se is code review process. That is actually Axel mentioned it in the keynote. When you're doing code review, ensure that all these practices are in place. And for automatic checks, we had enough talks today about the previous talk was about rough linters. Run all of them. And other infra practices includes monitoring and observability, like how much DAGs have run, what are your error metrics, and that is very specific. I'm not touching a lot on infra, but because it's very specific to the company you are in and the scale that you are in. So these are like general guidelines. Use secret managers is something that I hold very close to my heart because, again, if you have it in a DB, things might get weird over a period of time. I've seen it happen multiple times. Fernet keys going havoc and we are losing everything about secrets. So use secret managers. Finally, my favorite part, all of this has happened only because of the Airflow community. And the last time I gave this talk in Berlin in 2023, the Slack community was much smaller. Now we are 35K members, and there is active GitHub discussions. Thanks to AI, there is no Stack Overflow in here. That era is almost gone. And of course, the best practice is to contribute back. And if you want to have more discussions on what the best practices are specific to your use case, here is an Airflow channel very dedicated for that. I'm not sure how many of you are aware of this. Here is a very nice ask from one of our community members. And with that, I'm open for